There is a particular kind of tiredness that regular show is built to hold. It is late, the room is dark, and you are watching two friends who work at a park do almost nothing of consequence, and somehow that is the point. You already know how this episode ends. You have heard Rigby lose an argument in that scratchy, overeager voice 100 times, and the 100th time is softer than the first, because now it arrives without suspense, only recognition. The half-awake mind does not want to be surprised. It wants the shape of something it already trusts, the rhythm of Mordecai saying his name, the small domestic chaos of a house shared by a blue jay and a raccoon, and the way the show lets a Saturday afternoon stretch out into something almost eternal. Tonight is not about any single episode. Tonight is the whole story of Rigby, told slowly, from the very first time an actor sat in a booth and read a line about a raccoon he did not yet understand, all the way through the small park and the long years that followed. You are listening to Velvo. There is nothing you need to do here and nowhere you need to be. Let the phone rest somewhere you cannot see it. Let your shoulders come down from wherever the day left them. The story does not require your attention, only your company, and it will keep going whether you follow every word or drift off somewhere around the middle and surface again later. Settle into whatever position feels like the beginning of sleep. Pull the blanket up. Breathe out once, slowly, and let the next breath be a little quieter than the last. When you are ready, and there is no hurry at all, we will begin at the beginning, with a man who was convinced he had no chance of getting the job. Consider the strange arithmetic of a voice that almost did not happen. William Salyers, the actor who would eventually become the growling, whining, restless engine of half of regular show, did not walk into the role once. He walked into it twice. The first time was for a small pilot short made in 2009, a one-off produced under a Cartoon Network experiment. The second time came later, after the network decided that the pilot deserved to become a series, and the part had to be won all over again. 2 doors, 2 auditions, the same raccoon waiting on the other side. What makes the first of those auditions worth thinking about is how little Salyers actually knew when he sat down to do it. By his own account, he did not even understand what he was reading for at first. He knew one thing and only one thing about the character. It was a raccoon. Everything else, the tone, the world, the relationships, the fact that this creature would one day carry an entire animated series on its narrow shoulders, none of that was available to him. He was working almost blind, holding a page of dialogue for a cartoon animal and trying to find a way in. And then there was the line about chew ties. Somewhere in the script sat a reference to chew ties, a phrase that meant nothing obvious, a small verbal knot with no clear instruction attached to it. Salyers did not know what it meant. He could have read it flat, cautiously, the way a person reads words they do not understand. Instead, he made a choice. He delivered the line with hyperactive energy, throwing sound and speed at the confusion, rather than shrinking from it. And that decision is the whole story in miniature. The very thing that should have tripped him, a line he could not decode, became the thing that revealed the character. The creators were impressed enough to book him for the pilot on the strength of it. Think about what that means for a moment. The essence of the raccoon, the twitching, overclocked, slightly desperate quality that would later define him, was born not from careful preparation, but from an actor covering for the fact that he did not know what he was saying. The hyperactivity was a survival strategy, and it happened to be exactly right. There is something almost fitting about that. A character built on not quite understanding the situation, brought to life by an actor who did not quite understand the situation either. The second audition, the one that came after the series was picked up, carried a completely different weather inside it. By then, the stakes were higher. The pilot had earned enough attention to become a real show, which meant the part of Rigby had become a real job, and real jobs bring pressure. Salyers, though, has said he was not nervous at all for that final audition. The reason is a small human paradox worth sitting with. He was convinced he had no chance of getting the job. He had already decided, privately, that the role was not going to be his, and that certainty of failure did something unexpected. It removed the fear. With nothing to lose, because he believed there was nothing to win, he could relax completely into the performance. That relaxation produced the moment that sealed everything. The script called for a bit of ham-boning, the old percussive style of slapping the body to make rhythm, and rather than gesturing at it or reading around it, Salyers simply started slapping his own chest right there in the booth to perform the thing the page described. It was spontaneous. He committed to the physical act of it, hands against his own body, making the sound real instead of implied. And J.G. Quintel, listening in the booth, laughed. That laugh is the hinge of the whole episode. The creator of the series, hearing an actor throw himself bodily into a nonsense percussion bit, found it funny, and the funniness was the audition passing. A man who thought he had no chance had just relaxed his way straight into the part. To understand why Quintel was the one sitting in that booth, and why his laugh carried the weight it did, you have to go back several years before any raccoon existed at all. Quintel earned a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Character Animation from the California Institute of the Arts, CalArts, in December of 2005. That is the training ground underneath everything. His thesis film there, the short that closed out his time as a student, was called The Naive Man from Lollyland, made in 2005, and it was an award-winning piece. So the sensibility that would later shape regular show did not arrive from nowhere. It was built inside an animation program, tested in a student film, and recognized before Quintel had ever pitched a network anything. From school, the path led into the working machinery of television animation, the unglamorous middle where most careers actually take shape. Quintel spent time as a storyboard revisionist on Camp Lazlo from 2005 to 2008, doing the patient corrective labor of fixing and refining boards that other people had drafted. After that, he moved up to creative director on The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack from 2008 to 2010, a show with a strong and strange visual voice of its own. Those two credits matter because they are the practical education, the years of learning how a cartoon is actually assembled, panel by panel, before he was ever trusted to build one from the ground up. In 2008, while still inside that world, Quintel brought his own idea to Cartoon Network's Cartoonstitute program. The way he pitched it tells you something about who he was as a maker. He did not stand up and talk the idea into being. He presented regular show as a storyboard rather than a verbal pitch, letting the drawn sequence carry the argument instead of a speech. For a storyboard revisionist, a person whose craft was precisely the language of boards, that is the natural instinct. He pitched in the medium he trusted most. He let the pictures do the persuading. Underneath the pictures sat an influence that is easy to overlook and surprisingly revealing once you notice it. Quintel has pointed to the video game ToeJam and Earl as an inspiration for the series, and specifically for the central pairing of Mordecai and Rigby. He has said the game gave him what he called the perfect platform for developing that dynamic, the two-character friendship that would become the spine of the entire series. Consider the source of it. Not another cartoon, not a film, but a game about two mismatched companions wandering a strange world together. The blue jay and the raccoon, the tall calm one and the short frantic one, grew in part out of a memory of playing something as a kid. The chemistry that Salyers would later have to audition into was seeded years earlier by a video game about friendship. The pilot itself came together under the banner of that Cartoonstitute program, which was Cartoon Network's anthology experiment, a place designed to generate many short one-off cartoons and see which ones breathed. The regular show pilot short, later given the title First Day, was made for that anthology, and it was posted to Cartoon Network's website on the 14th of August, 2009. That is the public birth date of the thing, a short film released online rather than premiered in a prime-time slot, placed where people could find it. Here is the part that carries a small irony. The Cartoonstitute anthology, the program that made the pilot possible, was itself never picked up as a series. The container failed. The experiment as a whole did not become an ongoing show. But out of that unpicked up program, Cartoon Network executives looked at the raccoon and the blue jay and decided to greenlight regular show as a standalone series anyway. The anthology died, and one of its children lived. Everything that followed, every season, every episode, every hour of this show that people now fall asleep to, came out of a single short that survived a program that did not. There is a lovely closing loop to the pilot story, one that folds the beginning back into the body of the series. That original 2009 pilot did not simply vanish once the series proper began. An extended, director's cut version of it later aired as an episode of Season 2, also titled First Day. So the very first thing Quintel made The short that had to justify itself inside a doomed anthology eventually returned as a numbered episode of the real series, longer and fuller than before, slotted into the run as though it had always belonged there. The origin became a chapter. The proof of concept became canon. Hold all of it together and a shape appears. On one side you have a maker, trained at CalArts, honed on Camp Lazlo and Flapjack, carrying a childhood memory of a video game about two companions, pitching in drawn boards rather than words because that was the language he trusted. On the other side you have an actor who walked in twice, understood almost nothing the first time, covered his confusion with manic energy, and returned only to relax his way through the second try because he was sure he would lose. The character that resulted, this small, furry bundle of noise and appetite and bad decisions, sits precisely at the meeting point of those two accidents. A design carried by pictures, a voice found by not knowing. It is tempting to imagine that a character this central must have been engineered with total confidence, planned down to the last inflection. The truth the facts describe is gentler and more human than that. A student film, a couple of workmanlike jobs, an old game, a storyboard instead of a speech, a confusing line about chew ties, a spontaneous slap against the chest, a laugh in a booth. None of it looks like destiny while it is happening. It looks like a group of people making choices in the dark and occasionally getting lucky. The raccoon slacker voice, the one that would carry so many quiet late hours for so many listeners, was assembled out of exactly that kind of luck, and it held. The episode that gives us the clearest window into who Rigby is and why he behaves the way he does is not one of the loud ones. It is the 10th episode of the first season, titled simply after the person Rigby spends the whole story trying to keep at a distance. It first aired on the 8th of November, 2010, and on paper, it is a story about taxes. Underneath, it is a story about a grown man who has never stopped being 6 years old at his own birthday party. Consider how it opens. Mordecai and Rigby are indoors, playing a pretend football game against each other, throwing themselves into a make-believe contest with no stakes and no audience. This is the natural state of these two, the thing the show returns to again and again. They invent a game, they narrate it, they compete over nothing. It is worth sitting with that image for a moment, because the whole episode is going to press on it. Two friends who treat play as the most serious activity available to them, and then the real world walks in and interrupts. Benson calls an emergency meeting outside, and the reason is almost too gentle to be a crisis. The park is being audited. It is being audited because Pops, in his soft and well-meaning way, tried to pay the park's taxes with lollipops instead of real money. Think about what that tells you about the world these characters live in. The threat is bureaucratic, adult, the kind of thing that has consequences measured in paperwork rather than monsters. And the person who caused it did so out of pure innocence, believing that sweetness could stand in for currency. The park is a place where childishness usually costs nothing. Here, for once, it has generated a bill. The meeting itself gives us a small, sharp piece of characterization before the main story even begins. Muscle Man responds to the crisis the only way he knows how, by making his "my mom" jokes, and Benson, with no patience left, fires him on the spot. It happens quickly, and it happens right before Mordecai steps in with a suggestion. The episode is drawing a line for us between two kinds of unhelpfulness. There is the loud, joking deflection that adds nothing, and there is the person who actually offers a way forward. Mordecai is the one who offers the way forward. He suggests bringing in Rigby's brother Don, who is an accountant, exactly the sort of person a park drowning in a tax problem would want. And this is the moment the episode turns, because Rigby objects, not mildly. He does not want Don anywhere near the park, and the episode lets us understand why. Rigby has hated Don ever since Rigby's 6th birthday party, when Don stole the attention of Rigby's friends. That is the wound. Not a betrayal, not a cruelty, nothing Don did on purpose. Simply that on a day meant to belong to Rigby, the people Rigby wanted to be seen by looked at someone else instead. And the someone else was his own brother. You can hear an entire childhood compressed into that one grievance. A childhood of being in the room and not being the one anyone was watching. Here is the detail that makes the whole thing turn from ordinary sibling friction into something more interesting. Don is Rigby's younger brother. He is younger, and yet he towers over Rigby, and he is by every visible measure the more mature of the two. That inversion is the engine of the episode. In the usual order of things, the older sibling is the bigger one, the one who arrives first and sets the standard the younger one measures himself against. Rigby has the opposite arrangement. He is the elder, and he has been overtaken, physically and otherwise, by the brother who came after him. Every time Don stands next to him, the room can see it. The one who was supposed to be ahead is small, and the one who was supposed to be behind is large. When Don actually arrives at the park, the show does not make him a villain, and that is the cruelest choice it could have made for Rigby. Don is cool. He is nice. He is funny. He is much taller than his older brother, and from the moment he arrives, he seems to win people over with an easy, affectionate warmth. He wins everyone over instantly, without effort, in the exact way Rigby never manages to. And notice what that does. It removes Rigby's only defense. If Don were arrogant or unkind, Rigby's hatred would be justified, and we would side with him. Instead, Don is genuinely likable, which means Rigby's resentment has nothing external to attach to. It is revealed as what it always was, a thing that lives entirely inside Rigby, fed by his own sense of being smaller and less loved. The park-loving Don is not an attack on Rigby. Rigby experiences it as one anyway. That gap between what is happening and what Rigby feels is happening is the real subject here. The resentment does not stay quiet. It escalates into open hostility, and the target it finds is telling. Rigby catches Mordecai hanging out with Don, and he mocks Don, and he throws a football into Mordecai's stomach. Return for a second to how the episode began, with Mordecai and Rigby throwing a pretend football at each other in play. The football was an instrument of friendship, of the private game only the two of them shared. Now Rigby uses it as a weapon, and he uses it against Mordecai, not against Don. That is worth pausing on. The person Rigby lashes out at is not the brother he claims to hate. It is his best friend, for the crime of enjoying Don's company. What Rigby cannot stand is not Don himself so much as the sight of Don being chosen, again, by the people Rigby wants for his own. It is the 6th birthday party happening a second time, in real time in front of him, and this time the friend being pulled away is the one who matters most. Then comes the line that shows how far Rigby is willing to go. Don is nearly finished. The taxes are almost fixed, the crisis almost over, and all Rigby has to do is let his brother complete the work. Instead, at the last moment, Rigby drives him away by telling him he should never have been born. It is a devastating thing to say, and the episode does not soften it. This is the point where a story about jealousy becomes a story about how jealousy corrodes the person who carries it. Rigby would rather lose everything than let Don be the one who saves the day. He has taken his oldest, most private pain and turned it into the most wounding sentence one sibling can hand another, wishing the other out of existence entirely. And he does it not because Don has harmed him, but because Don has helped. And being helped by Don means being smaller than Don. And being smaller than Don is the one thing Rigby cannot survive. What follows is the natural consequence, and the show plays it as consequence rather than punishment. Mordecai tells Rigby to go and get Don back. Rigby refuses. He insists on finishing the audit himself, and he does it wrong, and the park begins to magically disappear. The world literally starts unmaking itself because Rigby would rather ruin the whole thing than admit he needs the brother he resents. There is something almost fable-like in that image. The park vanishing piece by piece is the outward shape of Rigby's inward stubbornness, the visible cost of an insecurity that will not bend. And when Benson, watching his park erase itself, angrily orders Rigby to bring Don back, Rigby is still too stubborn to listen. He runs away in frustration instead. That is the reflex the whole episode has been building toward. Cornered, exposed, wrong, and told plainly to fix it, Rigby does the thing he has always done. He flees. This is the root of the slacker defensiveness the show will spend years exploring. The refusal to try, the running from responsibility, the anger that arrives whenever he is asked to measure up. It does not come from laziness. It comes from a fear of being found smaller than he wishes he were. And it is easier to run than to be measured and come up short. The episode could have ended in that frustration, but it does something more careful. Mordecai finds Rigby where the two of them live, in the bedroom they share, and he calls him out for his selfishness. He does not coddle him, and Rigby offers the defense that is really the confession at the center of everything. He tells Mordecai that Mordecai does not know what it is like to have a brother. It is Rigby reaching for the one thing that might explain, or excuse, the whole ugly day. You cannot understand, because you have never had someone stand next to you your entire life and make you feel small simply by existing. And Mordecai's answer is the emotional core the episode has been withholding. He says that although he has no brother of his own, he considers Rigby to be like a brother, awkward and embarrassing as Rigby can be. He does not pretend Rigby is easy. He names the awkwardness, he names the embarrassment, and he claims him anyway. This is the quiet correction to Rigby's entire misunderstanding. Rigby has spent the day believing that brotherhood is a competition he was born to lose, a matter of height and coolness and the attention of a room. Mordecai offers him a different version. Brotherhood as something chosen, something that includes the difficult parts on purpose. The taller, younger, better-loved Don was never the measure of whether Rigby was worth anyone's loyalty. The person who actually treats him like a brother is the one who has watched him behave badly all day and is still there, in their shared room, telling him so. It is a generous piece of writing for the 10th episode of a first season, and it sets a pattern the series will keep returning to. Rigby's worst behavior almost always traces back to this same place. A childhood insecurity about being overlooked, a certainty that he is the lesser one, and a defensiveness built to hide it. The character of Don, whose voice credit is not something fans widely agree on, appears here as a single figure, but he functions as something larger. He is the shape of everything Rigby fears he is not. Taller, kinder in the eyes of strangers, effortlessly the person a room turns toward. That the show makes him genuinely lovable, and makes him Rigby's younger brother, and makes him innocent of any real wrong, is what keeps the episode honest. It refuses to let Rigby off the hook, and it refuses to let us hate the brother, which leaves only the truth. The problem was never Dawn. The problem was a 6-year-old at a birthday party who felt the attention leave the room, and never quite got it back, and grew up into a man who would rather watch the whole park disappear than be the one standing in his brother's shadow. There is a raccoon father named Sherm, and a raccoon mother named Barbera, and between them they raise 2 sons. The elder is Rigby, the one this whole story orbits, and the younger is Dawn. That is the first thing to hold on to, because so much of who Rigby becomes makes more sense once you know that he grew up as the older brother, in a house where the younger brother was the one who seemed to get things right. The series does not give us many scenes of that household. It gives us fragments, spread across years of real production time, and the fragments are enough. The parents do not appear on screen at all until fairly late. Their first appearance comes in an episode called The Thanksgiving Special, in the 5th season, which aired in late November of 2013. Think about that timing for a moment. By the time we finally meet the people who raised Rigby, we have already spent years watching the grown version of him, watching him fail and flinch and boast and hide. It lets us form our impression of the man before it shows us the parents, and then it asks us to read backward. Sherm is written as short-tempered, and the writing is direct about the shape of his favoritism. He openly prefers Don, the younger son, over Rigby. He compares the 2 brothers to each other, again and again, and the comparison is never in Rigby's favor. He criticizes. That is the father as the writers built him, and it is a specific kind of cruelty. Not the loud kind, but the corrosive kind. The kind that lives in a raised eyebrow and a sigh, and a sentence that begins with the words, "your brother." A child raised under constant comparison learns early that he is being measured, and that he is coming up short, and that the person doing the measuring is the one whose approval he most wants. Barbera is drawn as the counterweight. She is written as more sensitive, more caring toward Rigby than his father is, and when Sherm criticizes, she is sometimes the one who steps in to defend him. Picture the ordinary geometry of that. A father who scolds, a mother who softens, a son caught between them, learning to read the weather of a room before he has learned much of anything else. It is not a broken home in any dramatic sense. It is something quieter and more common than that. It is a home with a favorite, and a home where the child who is not the favorite has to work out, on his own, what to do with that knowledge. Now consider the way the parents actually behave when we first meet them, because the Thanksgiving special complicates the picture rather than confirming it. In that episode, Rigby confesses. He and Mordecai have destroyed all of the Thanksgiving food, every bit of it, and Rigby has to stand in front of his family and admit it. This is exactly the sort of moment his upbringing would have taught him to dread, the moment of falling short in front of the father who keeps score. And what happens is not what he braces for. Sherm smiles. He tells Rigby that that's what family is for, and then he reveals that he and Barbera had brought their own food for the dinner all along. Hold that against everything else the series tells us about Sherm, because the two things do not obviously fit, and the friction is the point. Here is the short-tempered father, the one who favors the other son, and in this one moment he chooses grace over the criticism you would expect from him. It would be easy to read that as the show softening him, or forgetting its own characterization, but there is a more honest reading available. Real fathers of this kind are not cruel in every hour of every day. The favoritism and the occasional tenderness live in the same person, and that is precisely what makes a childhood under such a father so confusing. You never know which one is coming. The grace, when it arrives, does not erase the years of comparison. It sits beside them, unresolved. Two men lend these parents their voices, and it is worth pausing on the casting, because voice is characterization in animation. Eddie Pepitone voices Sherm, the father, and Ali Hillis voices Barbera, the mother. In most of the appearances Barbera makes across the series, a voice carries the temper, or the tenderness, before a single line of dialogue is even parsed. The father sounds like the father, the mother sounds like the mother. The series did that work deliberately. The other fragment of Rigby's home life, and in some ways the sadder one, does not take place at home at all. It takes place at a school, in a flashback, inside an episode called Rigby in the Sky with Burrito, the 18th episode of that same 5th season, which reached audiences in 2014. The title itself is a small joke pointed at the adults in the audience, a reference to the Beatles' song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and the lightness of that reference makes the scene it houses land a little heavier by contrast. In the flashback, teenage Rigby is sent to the principal's office, and the person who has to come and collect him is his mother. Barbera arrives, and she says to him, "You're always making so much trouble for yourself." That is the line, word for word. Notice the exact grammar of it. She does not say he makes trouble for other people, or for her, or for the family. She says he makes trouble for himself. It is, in its way, the gentlest possible version of the complaint. The mother's version rather than the father's. An observation delivered more in worry than in anger. And yet think about what it means to be the child on the receiving end of even the gentle version. This is the caring parent, the one who defends him, and even she has arrived at the school with a tiredness in her voice, a sense that this is not the first time and will not be the last. The word always does a great deal of quiet damage. When the kind parent says always, the child hears that the pattern has been noticed by the one person who was supposed to be on his side. Put those two scenes next to each other, and you have almost the whole of what the story is willing to tell us directly about how Rigby was raised. A father who keeps score and favors the other boy, but who can, on the right day, offer an unexpected kindness. A mother who is softer and quicker to defend, but who is also worn down, who has made this drive to the principal's office before. A boy in the middle of it, learning to expect criticism and to be surprised by warmth, which is a difficult thing to unlearn. There is one later moment, well past all of this, that shows how the mother's role settles into place over the years. In the 7th season, in an episode called Rigby Goes to the Prom, which aired in the spring of 2016, Barbera does something small and telling. She secretly gives Rigby his father's car keys so that he can drive Eileen to the prom, and she asks him not to tell Sherm that she helped. Sit with the shape of that. The mother is still, years on, faithfully on Rigby's side, and she is still doing it around the father rather than with him. The defense has become a secret. She helps her son, and she helps him in a way that must be kept from the man of the house, which tells you that the old division between the two parents never really closed. It simply grew up alongside the sons. That is the home Rigby comes from. Not a tragedy, and not a punchline, but a set of ordinary pressures that the show doles out in careful pieces. A favored brother, a father whose approval was conditional and whose kindness was unpredictable, a mother whose love was real and whose patience was finite and who learned to help in secret. Everything the grown Rigby does, the boasting, the shortcuts, the terror of being caught falling short, has a plausible root somewhere in those few small scenes. The show never spells the connection out. It simply lays the pieces down, calmly, and trusts you to notice how well they fit. There is a version of this story that gets told wrong, and the mistake is worth sitting with before we go any further. People remember the friendship between Mordecai and Rigby as something forged at college, two young men meeting in a dorm hallway and deciding to stick together. That is not what the canon says. The friendship does not begin at a college at all, and the one character in the whole series who genuinely attends a real local community college is not Rigby. It is Margaret, who works toward a journalism degree before becoming a newswoman around season 6. A separate thread entirely, running parallel to the men and never touching the origin of their bond. Keep her to one side for now. Her schooling belongs to her. What we are looking at tonight is something older and stranger, and it belongs to Rigby. The bond does not start in early adulthood. It starts in childhood. In the season 1 episode called Dawn, which aired in 2010, we learn that Mordecai has known Rigby since Rigby was 5 or 6 years old. Weigh that for a moment. By the time these two are grown and pushing carts around a park for a living, they have already spent almost their entire conscious lives inside each other's company. There is no version of Rigby that predates Mordecai. The friendship is not a choice he made as an adult weighing his options. It is the water he grew up in. And it is in that same episode that the series gives us one of its earliest and plainest statements of how deep the thing runs. Mordecai tells Rigby in that episode, "I have you, dude. You're like my brother." That line is spoken by Mordecai, and it is easy, in a video like this one, to let Mordecai own it, because Mordecai is the one who says it out loud. But turn the sentence around. Listen to it from the other chair. If Mordecai considers Rigby a brother after knowing him that long, then Rigby has been receiving that message, spoken or unspoken, for the whole of his remembered life. That is the foundation we need in place before we can understand the thing Rigby does later, the thing that is almost unforgivable and yet, once you see the shape of his fear, almost inevitable. For that we have to leave the series proper and go to the film. Regular Show, the movie, was directed by the series creator J.G. Quintel. It was his feature directorial debut, and he wrote it together with William Salyers. It had a limited theatrical release on August the 14th, 2015, and then premiered on Cartoon Network on the 25th of November that same year. It is in this film, and not in any single series episode, that the film finally answers the question of what could ever seriously strain a friendship this old. And the answer, when it comes, is set in high school. Here is the setup, and notice how ordinary it is at first. Mordecai and Rigby both apply to a place called College University. The school's slogan is essentially that it is the college for everyone, a place with almost no admission requirements, a school that will take practically anybody who walks through the door. It is designed, in the logic of the film, to be impossible to fail to get into. And that is exactly the machinery of the tragedy, because Rigby's grades are so poor that he manages the impossible. He is rejected. From the college that accepts almost everyone, Rigby is turned away. Mordecai is accepted. Sit with the asymmetry of that. Two boys who have been inseparable since the age of 5 or 6, and the one document that arrives to divide them does not merely separate them, it ranks them. It says, in effect, that one of them is worthy of the college for everyone, and the other is not. For Mordecai, this is a piece of good news with a complication attached. For Rigby, it is something closer to a verdict on his whole self. And this is the part that a Mordecai-centered telling tends to skip past, because from Mordecai's side, the villainy is simple, and Rigby is the one who wronged him. But from Rigby's side, before he does anything at all, he is already the one holding the rejection. He is already the one who has been told he is the lesser of the pair by the least selective institution imaginable. What he does next is the hinge of the entire film. Rigby cannot face being separated from Mordecai. So he breaks into Mordecai's acceptance package, and he forges a fake rejection letter, and he tricks Mordecai into believing that he too was rejected from College University. Read that slowly. Rigby does not sabotage Mordecai's future out of spite. He does it to keep him. The forgery is not an act of malice toward his friend. It is an act of terror at the thought of losing him. Rigby would rather drag Mordecai down into the failure with him than stand in a world where Mordecai goes on ahead and Rigby is left behind, alone, for the first time in his remembered life. It is monstrous, and it is also, if you have understood the childhood fact, deeply legible. This is a person who has never known himself without the other, choosing, in a panic, the unforgivable. The film complicates the science of it further, and this is where the machinery becomes literal. Mordecai and Rigby build a time machine in high school. The machine was originally the property of their science teacher, a man named Mr. Ross, who was also their volleyball coach. Their plan with it is almost tender in its logic. They intend to send a message back to their past selves, telling them to get better grades, so that Rigby could still get into college university. That is what the time machine is for. Not glory, not adventure. It is a boy trying to reach backward and fix the one number that separated him from his friend. And it fails. The machine explodes. It destroys the science lab, and it gets both of them expelled. The man whose machine it was becomes the film's villain, and his grievance closes the loop in a way that is almost cruel to Rigby specifically. Mr. Ross, transformed into the antagonist called Lord Ross, is their former high school science teacher and volleyball coach, and he is seeking revenge on Rigby. Not on both of them equally. On Rigby, for costing the school a volleyball championship. So consider the full weight the film piles onto this one character. Rigby is the boy whose grades were too poor for the college that takes anyone. Rigby is the boy who forged the letter out of fear of abandonment. And Rigby is the boy whose failure on a volleyball court gave a bitter man the wound that eventually returns, years later, to threaten everyone. The film makes Rigby the origin point of nearly all its pain. The lazy version makes him simply the screw-up. I think that reading misses him. Every one of those failures is the failure of someone who could not bear to be less, or to be left. The truth cannot stay buried, and the film knows it cannot. During the climax, the forged letter comes out. Mordecai learns that his best friend, the one he called his brother, faked the rejection that shaped the direction of his life. And Mordecai is devastated. The revelation temporarily ends their friendship. Consider how much has to be true for that word, ends, to carry any weight at all. A friendship that started when one of them was still a child, that survived childhood and adolescence and expulsion and years of aimless adult work, actually breaks. The oldest thing either of them has, severed by a single sheet of forged paper. That is the price the film sets on the lie, and it is the correct price, because a betrayal is only as large as the trust it violates, and the trust here is nearly the size of 2 whole lives. They reconcile by the film's end. Of course they do, but I want to resist the easy comfort of that reconciliation, since the thing we came here to understand is not the making up, it is the leaning. Why does Rigby lean on this friendship the way he does, more heavily, more desperately than Mordecai ever seems to lean back? The film gives us the answer without stating it. Rigby leans because he has no memory of standing alone. He has been beside Mordecai since earliest childhood. When the college for everyone told him no, the friendship was the only thing left that had ever said yes to him without conditions. And so he committed a terrible act to protect the one relationship that had never ranked him and found him wanting. The forgery is the fear made visible. It says, more clearly than any line of dialogue, that Rigby would rather be a liar with his friend than an honest man without him. That is his side of the origin, and it is a heavier thing than the series usually lets itself admit in its half-hour form. The series gives us the warm version, the brotherly line spoken out loud in Season 1, the two of them slacking off in the park as though nothing were ever at stake. The film gives us the underside of that warmth, the reason Rigby holds on so tightly that he will damage the very thing he is holding rather than let go of it. Both are true at once. He is the brother who was there from the beginning, and he is the one who could not survive the thought of the ending, and those two facts are not in tension. They are the same fact, seen in daylight and seen at night. There is a temptation, when a chapter promises death, to reach for the grandest version of the story, the one where both friends fall and a lone hero storms the gates of the afterlife, to fight off rank after rank of guardians. The verified record is quieter than that, and stranger, and in some ways more honest about how this show treats mortality. Rigby does die on screen in regular show. Mordecai does not die alongside him, and when someone bargains for Rigby's soul, there are no guardians to fight through, only a single opponent and a single game. To understand how the series arrives at that moment, and why it matters for how recklessly Rigby lives, we have to begin somewhere that looks like it has nothing to do with dying at all. We have to begin with an argument over a video game. The series' fourth episode, Death Punchies, first aired on the 27th of September, 2010. It was written and storyboarded by members of the crew, and it opens on a dispute so small it is almost embarrassing to describe. Mordecai and Rigby have a new game called Dig Champs, and they cannot agree on who gets to be player one. This is the entire engine of the plot. Two grown creatures, a blue jay and a raccoon, unable to share the good controller, and so they settle it the way they settle most things, by playing Punchies. Mordecai wins instantly, not narrowly, not after a struggle, instantly, and the speed of it is the point. Because this is not a fair fight, and it never was. Mordecai tells Rigby, in effect, that everyone beats him at Punchies, and he reaches for proof. He brings up an old incident in which Skips once hit Rigby so hard that Rigby needed surgery. Surgery on his butt, specifically, which is the kind of detail the show loves, absurd on its surface and cruel underneath. Think about what that reference does. It establishes, before any real danger arrives, that Rigby has a body that can be broken, that has already been broken, that carries the history of being the smallest and the weakest in every physical contest he enters. The joke is the injury. The injury is also the record of a life spent losing to stronger hands. What Rigby does next is the whole of his character in miniature. He does not accept the loss. He does not shrug and let Mordecai be player one. Instead, humiliated, he goes looking for a shortcut to power. He finds an advertisement in a phone book for something called Death Kwon-do, and he travels to the dojo hoping to learn a single move, one move, that will let him beat Mordecai at Punchies. Understand the scale of the ambition against the scale of the stakes. He is willing to study a martial art named for death in order to win an argument about a controller. The disproportion is funny, and it is also the first sign of something that will follow Rigby all the way to his actual death. He treats small things as if they are worth any price, and he does not measure the cost until it is already spent. At the dojo he meets the instructor, called Sensei, and he is rejected. He is told he is not worthy of the martial art, that he is not pure of heart. This is worth sitting with, because the writing is being more precise than it lets on. A story that simply wanted Rigby to be an underdog would let him earn the power through effort. This story denies him the power on a question of character. He is not turned away for being weak. He is turned away for being the kind of creature he is. And the audience, having just watched him refuse to lose a fair game, has every reason to think the instructor has read him correctly. So Rigby steals it. He takes a notebook page from Sensei, a page detailing something called the Death Punch of Death, and on his way out he clogs the dojo's toilet using Death Kwon-do itself before he flees. The theft is the important part, and again it rhymes with everything else about him. He could not be given the power, and being unworthy of it did not stop him. It only changed the method by which he took it. He does not become pure of heart. He becomes a thief with a stolen technique, and the show never pretends this is a triumph. What happens after the theft is a small transformation played completely straight. Rigby adopts a new look, cut-off jean shorts and a mullet, and he tests his new death punch for the first time on a drawer in his own room. There is something almost tender about that first test being aimed at furniture, at an object that cannot be hurt and cannot fight back. It is the last harmless moment. From the drawer he moves outward into the park, and the punch stops being a private fantasy and becomes a weapon he uses on the people around him. He uses the death punch on Muscle Man, on High Five Ghost, on Pops, and, in a detail the show clearly savors, on Skips, the very one whose old blow put Rigby on an operating table. The power he stole is aimed first at the person who once proved how powerless he was. And it does not stay contained to bodies. The rampage spreads to the park itself. The snack bar takes damage. The fountain takes damage. The circus tent takes damage. A creature who could not win a game of Punchies is now strong enough to wreck the property he is supposed to help maintain. And the episode lets the destruction pile up without ever tipping into celebration. This is what Rigby does with power the moment he has it. He does not use it to protect anyone or to fix anything. He uses it to hit the people who have beaten him and to break the world he lives in, all because he lost an argument he could have simply walked away from. Mordecai's return to the story is quiet and a little sad. He comes back to find their shared room wrecked. On the floor, he discovers the Death Quando advertisement, the same ad from the phone book, and the pieces assemble for him without anyone explaining them. He looks out and sees Rigby attacking strangers in the park, and rather than confront his friend directly, he heads to the Death Quando dojo himself. The episode, as our verified record holds it, leaves the two of them on converging paths, one having stolen the power and one going to the source of it. What matters for this chapter is the shape of the thing. The whole catastrophe grew from a game of Punchies. Nobody dies in Death Punchies. The word death is in the title and in the name of the martial art and in the name of the punch, and yet the episode is careful to keep death as a word, a threat, a style of comedy, and not an event. It is the show rehearsing mortality as a joke before it commits to mortality as a fact. The fact comes later. It comes in the second season, in an episode called Over the Top, which aired on the 23rd of May, 2011. And this is where Rigby actually dies on screen, not in the episode with death in its title. In a different episode entirely, and Mordecai does not die there with him. If you came to this chapter expecting the two friends to fall together, the record gently corrects you. Rigby dies alone. The way he dies is the way he always courts danger, through a shortcut he did not earn. In Over the Top, Rigby is arm wrestling Skips, and he keeps winning, which should be impossible, because we have known since Death Punchies that Skips is the one strong enough to send Rigby to surgery. Rigby is winning because he is cheating. He is secretly using a hidden device that boosts his strength, something called the Playco Armboy, and he wins match after match against Skips without Skips understanding why. Look at how exactly this repeats the older pattern. Denied a fair victory over someone stronger, Rigby reaches for a hidden advantage and takes the win he could not honestly hold. In Death Punchies, it was a stolen page. Here, it is a strength-boosting machine strapped out of sight. The method changes. The creature underneath does not. And, as before, the advantage is torn away from him. Skips finds the Armboy and pulls it off Rigby, and he forces a real rematch, an honest arm wrestling match between Rigby's actual strength and his own. There is a terrible fairness to it. Skips is not being cruel. He is insisting on the truth, that the contest be decided by what Rigby can actually do, and the truth is exactly what Rigby has spent both of these episodes running from. The real match happens. Skips slams Rigby's arm down, and the slam kills him. The strength that once required a stolen martial art to answer, the strength that once needed surgery to survive, finishes the job this time. Rigby dies because he insisted on competing, past the point of sense, against a power he was never able to match on his own. What Skips does next is the part that reframes everything. To bring Rigby back, Skips challenges the character Death to an arm wrestling match. He wagers his own soul against Rigby's, his life against his friends, and here the record is very clear about a thing the grand version of this story would get wrong. There are no other guardians. There is no gauntlet, no army standing between Skips and the friend he is trying to save. There is one opponent, Death himself, and one game, the same game that killed Rigby in the first place. Skips does not fight his way through anything. He sits down across from Death and puts his soul on the table over a match of arm wrestling, the exact contest, the exact motion that took Rigby's life a scene earlier. Hold those two facts against each other, because the writing has built them to be held that way. Rigby dies from arm wrestling because he cheated at arm wrestling. Skips saves him by winning at arm wrestling honestly, against Death, with his own soul as the stake. The thing that destroyed Rigby is the thing that redeems him, but only in stronger hands, only when someone is willing to bet everything and to do it straight. Rigby could never have saved himself. He proved across 2 episodes that he does not have the strength and does not have the honesty, that faced with a stronger hand, he reaches for the shortcut every single time. It takes Skips, the strongest and the most disciplined of them, the one who broke Rigby's body twice, to sit down and win the game that Rigby was never equipped to win. This is the early, formative brush with mortality that the chapter promised, and it does its work in a way that is almost the opposite of a lesson. Rigby dies, and Rigby comes back, and the manner of his return teaches him nothing about caution, because he did not earn the return. Someone else earned it for him, at the risk of their own soul, while Rigby was already gone. Consider what that does to a creature. He now carries the knowledge, somewhere underneath, that death is survivable, that even losing his life did not finally cost him anything, because Skips was there to wager against death and win. A creature who learns that the worst outcome can be undone by someone stronger has no reason to fear the worst outcome. The recklessness that runs through Rigby, the willingness to treat any small stakes as worth any price, the reaching for stolen power over honest effort, all of it survives his death intact, because his death was not, in the end, permanent. The title with death in it kept death as a joke. The episode without death in its title made it real, and then took it back. Between those two, in the space where a raccoon dies over a game he was cheating at, and is returned by a friend who wagered a soul over the same game played fairly, you can see the whole architecture of how Rigby lives. He does not live carefully. He has never had a reason to, and the one time the universe truly punished him for it, someone he did not deserve reached into the dark and pulled him back out. There is an episode early in the first season that most people remember for its grotesque central image, the moment a cartoon raccoon's body walks away from him, and forget for what it actually says about the kind of person Rigby is. It aired on the 15th of November, 2010, the 11th episode of the series, and it is called simply Rigby's Body. What happens inside it is absurd, even by the standards of a series built on the absurd. But strip away the science fiction of a consciousness living in a bucket, and you are left with something plainer and sadder, which is the story of a person who is warned, clearly and in time, about what his appetites will cost him, and who chooses the appetite anyway. It begins, as so many of their disasters begin, with the two of them working a shift they do not want to work. Mordecai and Rigby are stationed at the snack bar, and rather than do the job, they fall into one of their circular arguments, the kind that goes nowhere and generates only heat, and they call each other turds, repeatedly, with real feeling. There is something almost tender in how petty it is. These are not enemies. They are two friends who have known each other long enough to have worn certain grooves into the friendship, and one of those grooves is the insult that means nothing, the word passed back and forth like a coin. Pops arrives to break it up, and the way he breaks it up tells you everything about Pops. He does not scold them in any real sense. He tells them, in effect, to stop arguing and simply be turds, as though that were a gentle and acceptable thing to be, and then, almost as an afterthought, he mentions that all the snacks are free for employees. He says it the way a wealthy person says things about money, lightly, without weight, because to him it carries no weight at all. And this is the hinge the whole episode turns on. A careless remark from someone who has never had to think about the price of anything, dropped into the laps of two people who are about to take it completely literally. Consider what happens next, because it is the real subject of the episode, and everything supernatural that follows is only the consequence made visible. Believing the snacks are free, Mordecai and Rigby begin to eat, not to snack, not to sample, but to consume, ravenously, the entire contents of the snack bar, until they feel sick. There is no hunger driving this. They are not starving men who have stumbled onto food. They are two employees who have been told there is no limit, and the absence of a limit is, for them, an instruction. The permission itself becomes the appetite. Hold on to that, because it is the truest thing the show ever said about Rigby without seeming to try. He does not want the food. He wants the having of it, the endlessness of it, the feeling that nothing is being asked of him in return. The difference between the two friends surfaces at exactly the point where the fun curdles into consequence. Mordecai, feeling ill, does the ordinary human thing. He eats a salad. It is a small gesture, and a slightly ridiculous one. A cartoon character reaching for greens after a binge, but it is recognizably the behavior of someone who understands that the body keeps an account, that excess has to be balanced somewhere, that you cannot simply take and take. Rigby refuses, and the way he refuses is the key to his whole character. He does not merely decline the salad. He insists, against all sense, that more junk food is the cure, that the way out of the sickness is further into the thing that caused it. The problem, in his logic, is not that he has consumed too much. The problem is that he has not consumed enough. This is not a small joke. This is the shape of an addict's reasoning, rendered in the simplest possible terms, and the show trusts you to see it without underlining it. Every person who has watched someone chase a bad night with more of the same recognizes this instantly. The belief that the substance which is hurting you is also the thing that will heal you if only you have a little more of it, is one of the oldest and most reliable ways a person destroys himself. Rigby is a raccoon in a snack bar, and he is also, in this moment, every gambler who doubles down to win back what he lost. Every person who cannot admit that the answer is to stop. Mordecai warns him. This matters, and the episode takes pains to make sure it matters. Mordecai tells him, in effect, that his body will quit on him if he keeps overeating. The warning is explicit. It is not vague. It is not too late. It is not delivered in a language Rigby cannot understand. It is a friend saying, plainly, that there is a line and that he is about to cross it. And Rigby, having heard the warning in full, shoves a donut into his mouth and immediately collapses in severe pain. The timing is the whole point. There is no gap between the warning ignored and the punishment arriving. The show refuses to let him have even a moment of ambiguity, a stretch of time in which he might have thought he had gotten away with it. He is told. He does it anyway. He falls. What follows is where the episode makes its metaphor literal, and it is worth slowing down for, because it is truly strange. Rigby's body begins to move on its own. It is no longer his to command. It reaches in and physically pulls his consciousness out of itself, and then it flees, leaving him behind, and it leaves him resting as a bare consciousness inside a bucket. The body has, in the most exact sense of Mordecai's warning, quit on him. It has looked at the terms of the arrangement, the endless consumption, the total disregard for its needs, and it has resigned. And this is the detail that lifts the episode above simple slapstick. The body is not destroyed. It is not sick unto death. It is fine. It simply no longer wants to belong to the person who was treating it this way, and given the chance, it walks off to find a better life without him. There is a cruelty in that idea that the series plays for comedy, but that lands, if you let it, as something closer to horror. The part of Rigby that does the living, that carries him around, that absorbs the damage of his choices, is the first part to give up on him. It endures the arguing, and the eating, and the refusal to listen, and then, at the donut, it decides it has had enough. The consciousness in the bucket is the part of him that made the decisions, and it is left with nothing to move. A mind without a means, watching the vehicle of its own life run away. Skips, as he so often is the one who arrives with the rule that governs the disaster. He tells Rigby and Mordecai that if the consciousness is not reunited with the body before sunset, Rigby will remain bodiless forever. The deadline is the mercy and the threat at once. It means there is a way back, but it also means the way back has an expiry, that the window in which a person can undo the damage of his choices is not open indefinitely. You get, the rule says, a certain amount of time to reclaim what you threw away, and then the throwing away becomes permanent. The show then does something rather brilliant with that rule, which is to introduce a version of Rigby who ran out of time. In a garbage truck of all places, the disembodied Rigby meets another consciousness in the same predicament, a former bodybuilder who now lives inside a basketball. His story is a mirror held up to Rigby's own. His body, too, quit on him, not from overeating, but from overtraining, from the opposite excess arriving at the same destination. And crucially, he failed to reclaim it in time. He is what Rigby becomes if Rigby fails. He is the sunset that already passed for someone else. That the bodybuilder went too far in the other direction is the detail I find most telling. It is not making a narrow point about junk food. It is making a wider one about a body pushed past what it will tolerate, in either direction, by a person who could not find the middle that Mordecai found with his sad little salad. Discipline taken to obsession and indulgence taken to collapse arrive at the same bucket, the same basketball, the same garbage truck. The lack of a limit is the disease. the particular flavor of the excess barely matters. And then this other consciousness does the thing that consciousness without a body does. It learns that Rigby's body is still in good condition, still usable, still young and whole, and it steals it. It takes the body Rigby abandoned and runs off in it, and when Rigby confronts him, he offers no apology and no philosophy. Only the words, finders, keepers. There is a bleak kind of justice in that line that stings. The body was, after all, going spare. Rigby left it. He treated it as though it were free, the way he treated the snacks, and someone who wanted it more simply took it. The recovery is pure cartoon, and I will not pretend it is anything else. Skips and Mordecai and Rigby get the body back by running it over with a golf cart, which knocks the stolen consciousness loose, and that consciousness ends up stuck to a playground slide after a child slides down with its mouth open. It is grotesque and it is funny, and it is the series being the series. But watch how it ends, because the ending is not triumphant. Rigby is back in his own body, yes, but the body he abandoned and then had run over with a golf cart is now broken. He is in a cast. He is in a wheelchair. And when Mordecai asks him how he feels, he screams in pain. He got his body back, and it hurts, and it will keep hurting for a while, and that is the honest outcome of the whole ordeal. There is no version of this where the consequences simply vanish. And the final turn belongs to Mordecai, who reveals what the audience may have half suspected all along, that the snacks were never free for regular employees. Only Pops gets free snacks, because Pops is the heir to the park, and heirs live under different rules than the people who work for them. The whole catastrophe grew from a rich man's careless generosity that was never his to give. Mordecai and Rigby must now work at least 6 months to pay off the debt they ate. The permission was a fiction. The bill was always real, and Rigby, wheelchair and cast and screaming, is left to pay it. There is a line Mordecai throws at Rigby in the middle of an argument, and it is the kind of thing said in anger that turns out to be true. He tells him, in effect, that whatever else is being disputed between them, one fact remains beyond argument. There is still one irrefutable truth. You don't have a high school diploma. So, I'm smarter than you, you imbecile. That is the exact wording, and it matters that it arrives as an insult rather than a revelation. The series does not sit Rigby down and disclose his past to us. It lets his best friend weaponize it in the heat of a squabble, which means the first time the audience learns that Rigby never finished high school, we learn it the way Rigby has probably heard it 100 times before, as a taunt. This is Season 2, Episode 24, an installment called More Smarter, first aired in June of 2011. Consider how casually the fact is planted. It is not the premise of the episode so much as the fuel for it. Mordecai says the cruel true thing, and Rigby, stung, does what Rigby does. He goes back to his old high school to try to earn the diploma legitimately, to close the gap that has just been named out loud. And he is kicked out of the school entirely. That detail is worth holding on to, because it is the first small tragedy in a much longer story. The straightforward path, the honest one, the return to the classroom, is available to him for about as long as it takes to get thrown out the door. What he does next tells you where he is in his life at this point. Instead of finding another honest route, he finds an online advertisement for something called Brain Max, a chemical elixir sold as an intelligence booster, and he drinks it. He chooses the shortcut. He chooses the version of getting smarter that requires no work, no patience, no sitting in a chair being taught. The diploma was never really the point for him here. Winning the argument was the point, and Brain Max promises to let him win without changing. The elixir does its job in the way these things always do in this show, which is to say it works, and then it does not, and the fix becomes worse than the problem. To undo the effects, Mordecai and Rigby drink a reversal formula called Rig Juice. It reverses the intelligence boost successfully. It also leaves Rigby with slight memory loss. Sit with that ending, since the writers almost certainly did not intend it to carry the weight I am about to put on it, and yet it does. Rigby's first attempt to become a more educated person ends with him knowing slightly less than when he started. He is a little emptier than before. The whole detour, the humiliation at the school, the chemical shortcut, the messy reversal, nets out below zero. If the story ended there, It would be a small, funny, faintly bleak episode about a character who cannot be bothered to grow. For 4 seasons, more or less, that is exactly what it is. The diploma sits in the background of Rigby as an established fact about him, a marker of a life half-finished, and the series feels no urgency to resolve it. Then, years later in production time, and in the show's internal life, it comes back, and it comes back changed. The difference is the reason. In Season 7, in an episode called The Eileen Plan, Rigby learns that Eileen wants to date a more educated man. He feels insecure about this, and so he secretly starts going back to school to earn credits toward his diploma, and he does it without telling her. Notice everything that is different from more smarter, and everything that is the same. The motive is still external. He is still not doing it for himself, not exactly. He is doing it because someone he cares about has made him aware of a lack. But look at the method. There is no elixir this time. There is no online advertisement promising to skip the work. He goes back to school and starts earning credits, one at a time, the slow, honest way that got him thrown out the first time he tried it. The shortcut is gone. What replaces it is patience, and secrecy, and a quiet kind of shame that he does not want the person he loves to see. That secrecy is the thread I want to be careful about, because one could mistake this for a cover-up story, a man hiding a hidden past. It is not that. He is not hiding what he was. Everyone already knows Rigby never finished. Mordecai announced it as an insult years ago. What Rigby is hiding is the effort. He does not want to be watched while he tries, and possibly fails. That is a different and more human kind of privacy. The privacy of someone attempting to change and not wanting an audience for the attempt. The maturity arc, if we are calling it that, begins precisely here, in the decision to do the tedious thing quietly rather than the flashy thing loudly. The credits accumulate across the season, and the writing is smart enough to turn each remaining requirement into its own small reckoning. In Hello China, which aired at the end of November 2015, Rigby has to pass a foreign language class as part of his diploma credits. The class happens to be taught by Benson, who is spending a month in China teaching English. So Rigby sneaks onto Benson's flight to attend, following his own boss and his own coursework halfway around the world, and he ultimately passes. Set aside the absurdity of the setup for a second, and look at the shape of the action. The old Rigby ran away from school. This Rigby stows away on an international flight in order to get to school. The direction of the effort has completely reversed. He is now willing to go to genuinely ridiculous lengths to be present for a class, which is the opposite of a man who once drank a chemical to avoid the classroom entirely. The last requirement is the one the writers clearly saved on purpose. In Jim Blonsky, Rigby's final remaining class needed for his diploma is PE, and the substitute teaching it turns out to be Jablonski, the bully who tormented him for years growing up. Of everything standing between Rigby and his diploma, the show places the childhood bully last, as the final door. The two of them settle it with a takeout food race, which is exactly the kind of low, silly contest this world runs on. But the resolution is not that Rigby beats him. Jablonski passes him after Rigby appeals to their shared maturity. Sit with how unusual that is for this character. Rigby does not win by being faster, or louder, or by humiliating his old tormentor. He passes by pointing out, in effect, that they are both grown now, that the terms of their old relationship no longer apply. He resolves the last obstacle to his education by being, of all things, mature. The very quality the diploma is supposed to certify is the quality he uses to earn the last of it. All of this builds to the graduation special, and the special is where the series finally states out loud what it has been arranging for a whole season. In Rigby's graduation day special, Principal Dean selects Rigby to deliver a graduation speech, and the speech is to be broadcast live on an in-universe television program called Inspire America. The reason given is that Rigby's return to finish high school is treated as an inspirational comeback story. Stop and measure the distance between this and where we began. The same fact that Mordecai once hurled as an insult, "You don't have a high school diploma," has become the basis for a story worth broadcasting to a nation. Nothing about the fact changed. What changed is Rigby's relationship to it. He went from being a man defined by the lack to a man defined by the closing of the lack, and the show marks that transformation by putting him on television as an example to others. And here the story does something honest about friendship that I find genuinely affecting. Mordecai, the same person who named the wound in the first place, becomes jealous and resentful of Rigby's accomplishment. He initially refuses to help Rigby prepare the speech. He throws away a drink he had gotten for him, a small petty gesture that says everything about how threatened he feels. The friend who once used the diploma as proof that he was smarter now cannot stand that Rigby has, in this one arena, surpassed him. It is ungenerous, and it is completely believable, but it does not last. Mordecai reconciles and helps Rigby give a better speech, which closes the loop that more smarter opened. The insult that started the whole arc is answered, years later, by the same mouth offering help instead of mockery. That is the maturity arc extending past Rigby to include the person who first shamed him. The special is careful to remind us that Rigby's path is not the only one. Eileen also completes her education in the same episode, graduating college as valedictorian. She is not returning to finish something abandoned. She excelled straight through, top of her class, the more educated partner she once wished for made literal. The episode centers on Rigby's diploma rather than her degree, and there is a quiet asymmetry in that choice worth noticing. Her achievement is larger on paper, and the story spends less time on it, because her achievement was never in doubt. The drama belongs to the one who almost did not make it, which is how these stories usually work, and how they usually should. And then, at the very end, the series does the thing it always does, which is to refuse to let a warm moment simply be warm. The graduation special closes with the park staff activating the mysterious dome, which uproots and carries the entire park crew, including Eileen, into space. This is the Season 7 finale cliffhanger, and it lands right on top of the two graduations. Two people spend a whole season and, in Rigby's case, several seasons, finally completing their educations, finally arriving at the ceremony that says they have grown up, and the reward for growing up is to be lifted off the earth entirely and thrown into the unknown. There is something almost fitting in that. The diploma was never the destination. It was the proof that Rigby could finish something, and the moment he proves it, the show hands him the next thing he cannot possibly be ready for, and launches him toward it. Consider how quietly this arc begins, so much so that Eileen enters the show without Rigby in the room at all. Her first appearance comes in an episode called Brain Eraser, the 10th of the second season, the 22nd episode of the series overall, which aired late in February of 2011. She is a cameo there, barely a presence, a face beside Margaret rather than a character with a story of her own. What she does in that scene is talk with Margaret about Mordecai acting strangely. Consider what that seeds for everything to come. The woman who will eventually matter to Rigby arrives first as an observer of someone else's romance, standing at the edge of a feeling that is not hers, discussing a man who is not the one she will come to care about. Rigby is nowhere near her. He does not interact with her at all. It plants her in the ground and then, for 8 more episodes, simply lets her wait. When she returns properly, it is in an episode built around the very thing her cameo only glanced at. Do Me a Solid is the 18th episode of the second season, the 30th of the series, and it aired in the first days of May of that same year. This is Eileen's first major appearance, and it is the episode that establishes her crush on Rigby. The mechanism the episode chooses is a forced double date. Eileen is paired with Rigby, while Mordecai is paired with Margaret. 4 of them pushed into the same evening, and the audience is asked to watch how each half of that arrangement holds together, or fails to. Here is where the arc reveals what kind of arc it is going to be, because Rigby does not want to be there. He agrees to the double date only on a condition, and the condition tells you everything about where his attention actually sits. He makes Mordecai promise him 10 solids, 10 instant favors, 10 small debts to be called in whenever he pleases. That is his price for showing up. And once the evening begins, he does not spend the night with Eileen, or on Eileen, or thinking about Eileen at all. He spends those favors sabotaging Mordecai and Margaret's side of the date. The girl beside him is a formality. His energy goes entirely toward the couple across the table, toward interfering, toward the friendship and the rivalry that are, for now, the only relationships that feel real to him. The regular show wiki puts the matter plainly, and it is worth holding the exact framing in mind, because it marks the true starting line. As of Do Me a Solid, Rigby, in the wiki's words, did not reciprocate her feelings, nor did he consider her a friend. Sit with how cold that is as a beginning. Not indifference softened by fondness. Not a boy who secretly cares and hides it. She is not a person he likes, and not yet even a person he counts among the people he knows. She is a pest, an obligation, someone attached to an evening he only agreed to for the favors. If you are going to tell a slow-burn story, this is the lowest possible floor to build it from, and it chooses that floor deliberately. There is a piece of production history folded into this same episode that gives it a strange warmth from behind the scenes, even as the character on screen is being dismissed. Eileen was created and pitched by one of the show's storyboard artists, a woman named Minty Lewis. She made the character, and her pitch for this specific episode, "Do Me a Solid," is what convinced the creator, J.G. Quintel, to cast Lewis herself as the voice of Eileen. He did not arrive at that choice through a traditional audition. By his own account, he cast her because, in his words, Minty's voice, just her natural voice, was so perfect for that character. So the person who dreamed Eileen up also speaks her, and the moment that sealed that decision is the same moment in which Rigby wants nothing to do with her. The character is being brought fully to life at the exact point her love interest cannot see her at all. There is something quietly moving in that, an author breathing herself into a figure the story is treating as background. Now let the years pass, because the burn is slow by design and the show is patient with it. Move forward to the 4th season, to an episode called Meteor Moves, the 29th of that season, from 2013. 2 years of real time separate it from the double date, and Rigby has changed, though only by degrees, in the way real fondness tends to arrive. He is depicted here as noticeably more tolerant of Eileen than he once was. She delivers her rambling astronomy lectures, the kind of eager, overflowing talk that the earlier Rigby would have swatted away, and he lets it happen. He endures it. That is not love yet, and the show is careful not to pretend it is. He still gets irritated with her babbling, but notice what irritates him and why. Her talking distracts him from watching whether Mordecai is going to kiss Margaret at the meteor shower. So the old pattern is still visible, faintly, underneath the new tolerance. His eyes are still partly on the other couple, still invested in Mordecai's romance, the way he was on that first forced date. What has shifted is that he now absorbs Eileen's presence, rather than rejecting it outright. And there is one small moment in Meteor Moves that shows the change more clearly than his patience does. Mordecai and Rigby perform a rap, and immediately after them, Eileen performs a factual rap of her own. She joins in. She takes the same form the two of them just used, and answers it with her own version, stepping into their rhythm instead of standing outside it. This is one of her earliest moments of participating alongside Rigby, rather than being dismissed by him. Measure the distance the character has traveled to reach that. In the double date, she was an obligation he offloaded so he could meddle in someone else's evening. Here she is in the routine, part of the bit, allowed to answer back. The floor was that he did not consider her a friend. This is the first small evidence that the floor has begun, very slightly, to rise. What the series is doing across these episodes is refusing to rush. It gives Eileen a whole introduction in which Rigby is absent, a first date in which he spends every favor avoiding her, and then, years later, a meteor shower where he merely tolerates her and lets her rap. Each step is tiny. Each is honest. The affection is real, precisely because the show made you watch how little of it there was to begin with, and how slowly the little began to grow. There is a particular kind of secret that costs almost nothing to keep and everything to reveal, and Rigby has been carrying one of those for months. In Dumped at the Altar, the 28th episode of the 6th season and the finale of that year, the episode finally lets it out, and it does so in the most ordinary way imaginable. Rigby simply blurts it. He tells Mordecai, in the exact words the episode gives him, "Eileen and I are dating. For like a couple of months now. We have matching bracelets." That is the whole of it. No build, no swelling music, no dramatic pause. A confession delivered like a boy admitting he broke something. What makes the moment worth sitting with is not the fact of the relationship, but the shape of how it arrives. Rigby does not volunteer this out of pride or excitement. He says it only after Mordecai expresses doubt about his own ability to give relationship advice. Think about the sequence there. Mordecai, tangled in his own troubles, admits he does not feel qualified to help. And it is that admission, that small crack of humility, that pulls the truth out of Rigby. The secret does not come out because Rigby wants to share his happiness. It comes out because his friend has just confessed to being lost, and Rigby, in response, offers the one thing he has been hiding as a kind of proof that he understands more than Mordecai assumed. The reason for the secrecy is the tender part, and the episode pauses to explain it. Rigby says that Eileen asked him to keep the relationship hidden from Mordecai. The motive was not shame, and it was not a game. It was consideration. Eileen did not want the two of them to rub their happiness in Mordecai's face, while Mordecai was struggling with his own relationship problems. The long and painful complications with Margaret and with CJ. Consider what that means about how these characters have been drawn over 6 seasons. Eileen, so often positioned at the edge of the group, is the one who thinks to protect Mordecai's feelings by staying quiet about her own joy. She chooses to make her relationship smaller in the world so that it will not sting a friend who is hurting. And there is the physical evidence, which is almost unbearably modest. As proof that this is real and not a nervous invention, Rigby shows Mordecai the matching bracelets that he and Eileen have been wearing. That detail does a great deal of quiet work. A bracelet is a thing you wear every day, in plain sight, visible to anyone who might look. For months, these two have carried a shared token on their wrists, hidden not because it was concealed, but because no one thought to notice. The secret was never buried. It was simply worn openly by people no one was watching closely enough. When Rigby lifts his wrist as proof, he is showing Mordecai something that was always there. Now hold that against the setting, because the setting is the whole reason this moment lands the way it does. All of this unfolds during Muscle Man and Starla's wedding, the event around which the entire episode turns. A wedding is a public declaration of love, the most formal one a culture has. And into this ceremony, this monument to love made visible and official, the show threads its quiet counterstory, a love that has spent months trying to stay invisible. The contrast is deliberate. One couple stands at the front of the room announcing everything. Another couple sits somewhere in that same room having announced nothing, holding hands under the table, wearing their bracelets, keeping still. The wedding also gives us the other half of the episode, and it is worth holding both halves in the same frame, because they explain each other. While Rigby is confessing a relationship he tried to hide out of kindness, Mordecai is doing something close to the opposite. Mordecai hijacks Muscle Man and Starla's wedding to address his own relationship troubles, and he attempts to break up with his girlfriend CJ in front of the guests. Set those two behaviors side by side. Rigby's love story is one of restraint, of a couple willing to be invisible so as not to hurt anyone. Mordecai's is one of spectacle, of a man so consumed by his own confusion that he commandeers someone else's most important day to work through it in public. The episode is not subtle about which approach it admires, and it does not need to be. The quiet couple is the one that survives. There is a further turn in Mordecai's story that the episode insists upon, and it matters for how we read him. After his wedding speech, it is CJ who ultimately ends the relationship, rather than Mordecai dumping her. He arrives ready to be the one who acts, the one who decides, the one who ends things on his own terms in front of an audience. And the story takes that away from him. The choice is not his. CJ is the one who closes the door. There is a hard honesty in that reversal. A person who tries to seize control of a moment by making it as loud and public as possible often discovers that the loudness bought them nothing, that the outcome was never in their hands to begin with. The title of the episode carries that irony, the sense of being left at the altar of a wedding that was not even yours. And yet, despite Mordecai's disruption, the wedding still concludes with Muscle Man and Starla getting married. That is a small mercy the episode grants, and it is a meaningful one. The spectacle at the center of the room does not derail the actual event. The people who came to be married are married. Life closes over the disturbance and continues. There is something calming in that, the way a story can absorb a person's private crisis without letting it ruin everyone else's day. The world is larger than any one character's pain, and the wedding goes forward. What lingers, though, is the smaller image, the one the episode saves for after the reveal. Following the confession, Rigby and Eileen are shown dancing together at the reception. Sit with the plainness of that. No speech, no announcement to the crowd, no wrist raised for the room to see. Just two characters who have spent months keeping their happiness quiet, now allowed to be seen at last, in the most gentle way a wedding offers, moving together on a dance floor, while other people go on with their evening. The secret is over. Nothing about them has changed except that it can now be visible. The relationship goes from hidden to official, not through a grand statement, but through the simple act of no longer hiding. There is a reading of this chapter that treats it as a footnote, a subplot tucked beneath the noise of Mordecai's meltdown. I would push against that reading. This is the season finale, the last note of the 6th year, and the series chose to end it with two contrasting pictures of what love asks of a person. One picture is loud, self-centered, and ends in the loss of the very thing the character was trying to control. The other is quiet, generous, kept secret out of care for someone else, and it ends with a dance. The series has spent years following Mordecai's romantic struggles as its emotional engine, and here, at the close of the 6th season, it lets the couple who never demanded attention be the ones who simply endure. Notice, too, what the confession reveals about friendship, which was always the show's deeper subject beneath the romance. Rigby kept this from Mordecai for months, and he kept it out of loyalty, because his friend was in pain, and because Eileen asked him to spare that friend the sight of someone else's happiness. When he finally speaks, he speaks not to boast, but to reach across to a friend who has just admitted defeat. The matching bracelets were never really about romance alone. They were about two people quietly deciding, together, how to hold their joy in a room where their closest friend was grieving. And when the moment finally comes to let go of the secret, it comes wrapped in the same tenderness that made them keep it. So the season ends with a wedding that survives its own hijacking, a breakup that the wrong person delivered, and a slow dance between two characters who spent months making themselves small for someone else's sake. Of all the ways the series could have closed its 6th year, it chose to leave the light on the couple that never asked for it. There is a moment, near the end of everything, when the show finally does the thing it had spent 8 seasons refusing to do. The park crew comes home. The battle is over. The cosmos has been survived. And in the middle of all that return, Rigby dips Eileen and kisses her. It is the first time these two characters kiss on screen in the entire run of the series. Think about what that restraint means for a show that had already thrown its heroes across galaxies and through time. The largest thing it had left to do was small. 2 people, 1 gesture, held back for years and then given without ceremony. That is worth sitting with, because so much of the recent talk about this show orbits the cosmic material, the lore, the theories about what the universe of the park truly is. This chapter is not that. This is the quieter finale, the one that closes the personal arc rather than the shape of reality. And the kiss is where it turns. Everything after it belongs to a life rather than to a war. It helps to know who Eileen is beneath the character. She is voiced by Minty Lewis, and Lewis did not arrive at the role as an outside performer hired to read lines. She worked on the series as a writer and a storyboard artist before she ever voiced Eileen. So the person giving that character her voice had, in a real sense, helped build the world Eileen lives in. There is something fitting about that, a quiet doubling, the maker and the maid speaking through the same throat. When Eileen finally receives that kiss, the voice you are hearing belongs to someone who had drawn and written the fabric of the place it happens in. The finale that holds all of this is called A Regular Epic Final Battle. It is not a single episode but 3, the 27th through the 29th of the 8th season, each running roughly 11 minutes, so that the whole thing plays as one continuous piece broken into thirds. It first aired on Cartoon Network on the 16th of January, 2017. Knowing the structure matters, because it tells you the show gave itself room. It did not rush toward the ending. It built a wall of time large enough to turn around inside, and then it used that room not for more spectacle, but for a slow walk into the future. Because after the kiss, the epilogue leaps. 25 years forward, all at once. And on the far side of that jump, Rigby and Eileen are married, and they have 2 daughters. Consider how enormous that is for this particular character. Rigby, for most of the series, is the one who cannot hold anything steady, the one who avoids the shape of an adult life the way a child avoids a chore. The finale answers him not with a lecture, but with a house, a wife, and 2 children. It does not explain the 25 years. It simply shows you that he lived them. And it shows you one image in particular from inside that grown life. Rigby, at home, playing video games with one of his daughters, teaching her. That is the detail the show chooses to represent his fatherhood, and the choice is careful. Video games were, for the younger Rigby, a way to hide from responsibility, a thing you did instead of your work. Here, the same activity has changed its meaning entirely. The controller is no longer an escape. It is a thing he passes down, a way of being close to his child, the same object doing the opposite job. He has not stopped being who he was. He has carried it forward and handed it to someone smaller. All of this forward motion is carried by a song. The 25 years later montage is scored to David Bowie's Heroes. It is a knowing choice, and a generous one. That song has always been about ordinary people made large by love and by time, about being heroes just for one day, and the finale drapes it over lives that were never cosmic at all, only lived. The music does the work that no dialogue could. It tells you these small futures are the point, that the marriages and the daughters and the quiet houses are the epic the title promised, more than any battle was. Then the finale gives you its last real scene, and it belongs to the friendship the whole series was built on. Mordecai and Rigby, now 54 years old, reunite at the park, 25 years on. They reminisce about Pops. They play the old arcade games together, the way they always did. The game's older now, and so are they. There is no grand statement in it. Two men who were once young and foolish at this place come back to it and pick up where they left off, and the show trusts that image to carry the entire weight of their bond. The park is still there. They are still there. That is the reunion, and it asks for nothing more than to be watched. But the very last shot does not belong to either of them. It belongs to Pops. In the final image of the series, Pops is in the afterlife, and he is watching his friends' lives play out on a tape, a VHS-style cassette labeled Regular Show. He has been watching them. The house, the daughters, the arcade, the reunion, all of it has been a recording seen from somewhere beyond the story. And when it is done, he ejects the tape, and he says, "Jolly good show." That is the closing line of the series. Let that framing settle, because it changes what you have just watched. The series reveals, in its last seconds, that everything you saw was a show being watched by someone who loved these people. Pops, who gave so much of himself across the series, is the audience for their happiness. The two daughters, the marriage, the 54-year-old friends at their old machines. None of it was for the characters alone. It was for him, playing on a tape with the series' own name on the spine. And his verdict, gentle and final, is not sorrow, it is satisfaction. He watched his friends live good lives, and he judged the whole thing a jolly good show. That is how the personal arc closes. Not with the universe, not with a war, but with a kiss that waited 8 seasons, a leap of 25 years, a father teaching his daughter the same games he once hid inside of, 2 old friends back at the park, and a beloved figure in the afterlife, pressing eject, and offering 3 words of quiet approval over a Bowie song. The cosmic questions are left for others to chase. This ending only wanted to know whether these people would be all right, and it answers, without hurry, that they were. Rigby's story does not end with a battle. It ends with an epilogue, a quiet coda tucked into the closing minutes of a regular epic final battle, the 3-part finale that aired on Cartoon Network in January of 2017. The show has spent 8 seasons building to a cosmic confrontation, and then, when the fighting is done, it steps forward in time. In the Where Are They Now sequence, we learn that Rigby has finished high school. He has taken a job outside the park. He has married Eileen, and the 2 of them have children. That is the shape the man-child finally settles into, and it is worth sitting with how strange and how gentle an ending that is for a character introduced as the least responsible figure in the entire cast. By some accounts, the finale drew one of the largest audiences of the 8th season. Reports suggest Part 1 drew a substantial audience, and Parts 2 and 3 pulled in similarly strong numbers. Whatever else can be said about how the series chose to close, people showed up for it. They wanted to see how it ended, and the numbers suggest they had grown attached to these characters over the long arc of the series. That attachment is the thing this chapter is really about, because a finale is not only a piece of writing, it is a meeting point between what the creators made and what the audience carried into it. Not everyone agreed that the battle was the right vessel for Rigby's ending. In his review for the AV Club, the critic Eric Thurm made an argument that has stayed with a certain segment of the fandom. He pointed back one season earlier to Rigby's Graduation Day special, the Season 7 finale that aired at the end of June in 2016. That episode dramatized Rigby finally finishing high school, and Thurm argued that this moment, grounded as it was in years of him being an idiot, would have provided more meaningful closure to Rigby's arc than the climactic battle ever could. Think about what that claim rests on. The graduation earns its weight from the accumulated history of Rigby's failures. We watched him be careless and lazy and small for years, and so watching him cross that particular finish line means something a laser fight cannot easily match. And yet Thurm did not dismiss the epilogue itself. He read Rigby and Eileen's marriage and family as part of the show's underlying thesis. The argument, roughly, is that if even Mordecai and Rigby can grow up, then it is acceptable for the series itself to end. The two slackers were always the emotional anchor of the resistance to maturity, the pair who most wanted the world to stay exactly as it was so they could keep goofing off in the park forever. When they finally move forward, the series earns permission to stop. Rigby getting married, in this reading, is not a footnote. It is the signal that the story has completed the one transformation it always secretly promised. To understand why audiences cared so much about who Rigby married, you have to understand Eileen, and you have to understand the woman who made her. Eileen was created and voiced by Minty Lewis, who also worked on the series as a writer and storyboard artist. That dual role matters, because it means the character was shaped from the inside by someone who understood both how she sounded and how she functioned in the machinery of the plot. Lewis has spoken about who Eileen was at the start, describing her early appearances as, in her words, a pretty big weirdo nerd with major hots for Rigby. That is a precise and unsentimental self-assessment from the person who knew the character best. What Lewis said next is the more interesting part, and it complicates any simple story about growth. She has argued that Eileen herself did not fundamentally change over the course of the series. The nerdiness was always there. What changed was the audience. Viewers came to see that same quality, the very weirdness that read as off-putting at first, as more charming than off-putting instead. Sit with that, because it inverts the usual way we talk about character development. We tend to assume the character grows and the audience simply watches. Here the creator is telling us the opposite happened. Eileen stayed constant, and the perception around her softened and warmed until the thing that seemed like a flaw became the thing people loved. That reframing has real consequences for how we read Rigby's arc too. If Eileen did not change, then Rigby's eventual devotion to her is not a story about her becoming worthy of him. It is a story about him becoming capable of seeing what was always there. The man-child grows up not by finding someone new, but by finally recognizing the value of the person who had been standing in front of him the whole time. That is a quieter, less flattering, and frankly more honest model of maturity than most cartoons attempt. The fandom gave this pairing a name. Rigby and Eileen became Rigleen, a portmanteau ship that earned its own entry on the shipping wiki over on Fandom. Naming a couple is how an audience takes ownership of a relationship, folds it into their own vocabulary, and signals that they are invested enough to talk about it among themselves, without needing to explain who they mean. The existence of the name is small evidence of something larger. People were not passively watching Rigby drift toward Eileen. They were rooting for it, tracking it, and building a shared language around it long before the finale confirmed where it was headed. That investment did not stop when the series ended. On Archive of Our Own, the enormous fanfiction repository, there is a dedicated relationship tag for Eileen and Rigby, and it hosts an active, ongoing body of work. Fans continued writing the couple, extending their life beyond the frame the series gave them, imagining the marriage, and the children, and the ordinary days the epilogue only sketched. This is what a canonical pairing looks like when it lands with an audience. The show provides the outline, and the fandom colors in the years the credits did not have time to show. But fandom is rarely tidy, and it does not always follow the map the creators drew. On the same archive, there is a separate relationship tag, with its own dedicated page of works, for Mordecai and Rigby, read romantically. A segment of the audience chose to ship the two male leads with each other, rather than follow the canonical Rigby and Eileen pairing. This is not a small or hidden phenomenon. It sits right alongside the Rigleen works, a parallel reading of the same characters, and it tells you something about how these two occupied the audience's imagination. Their friendship was the true central relationship of the series, the bond the whole show orbited. And for some viewers, the intensity of that bond registered as something the canon never named. The show said Rigby ends up with Eileen. A portion of the fandom answered that the more important love story was the one between the two friends all along. Hold those two tags next to each other, and you get a fairly complete picture of how audiences metabolized Rigby's ending. One group embraced the growth narrative and celebrated the marriage, extending Rigleen into a future the series only glimpsed. Another group looked past the romance entirely and located the emotional core in the friendship, reading Mordecai and Rigby as the pairing that mattered. Both readings are responses to the same 8 seasons. Both are ways of saying the relationships in this show meant enough to keep writing about after it was gone. What the critical and fan responses share, underneath their disagreements, is a recognition that Rigby's ending was doing more than resolving a plot. Sherm measured the finale against the graduation and found the earlier, more grounded milestone more moving, yet still read the marriage as the philosophical key that let the whole series close. The Rigleen writers took the canonical growth at face value and cherished it. The Mordecai and Rigby writers set the growth aside and honored the friendship instead. Each of them was wrestling with the same question the epilogue posed. What does it mean for a character built entirely out of immaturity to finally, truly, grow up? The answer the show gave was a job, a wife, and children, delivered in a handful of seconds after the last battle. It is almost anticlimactic, and perhaps that is the point. Growing up does not arrive as a spectacle. It arrives as an ordinary life, quietly assembled out of the failures and small corrections of years. The audience understood this, which is why they kept arguing about it, kept writing about it, and kept holding these two slackers close, long after the park closed for the night. Rigby went from man-child to husband and father, and the people watching cared enough to disagree, at length and in public, about exactly what that transformation was worth. Rigby was never meant to be the one you remember. He was built to be the smaller half of a pair, the voice that says the wrong thing, the hand that reaches for the shortcut, the friend who makes the mistake so that someone else can look responsible by comparison. And yet across every season the show keeps returning to him, keeps asking what it costs to be the person who assumes he will always be carried. What you have followed is the slow correction of that assumption. You have watched him fail the same test again and again, until failing it stops being funny and starts being the whole point. And then you have watched him choose, quietly and without an audience, to become someone who finishes what he starts. Measure that against a character introduced as the one who never would. The growing up was not a single moment. It was the accumulation of small refusals to run, until the running was simply gone. So the story of Rigby is the story of a person learning that being loved and being trusted are not the same thing, and that the second one has to be built. It is patient work, and the show gives it the years it needs. And in the end, he is standing in a place he could not have imagined at the start. Older, steadier, a father with a hand resting on a small shoulder, still looking sideways at the friend beside him, the two of them quiet under a sky that has finally stopped rushing. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next.